How many types of diabetes are there?
There's two main types. Now, people develop type 1 diabetes in their childhood or when they're younger, even into their teens, whereas type 2 is the one that we've seen rising rapidly over the last few decades.
Who exactly is that impacted?
There's around 150 million people.
In the U.S. alone?
In the U.S. alone, yep.
Oh my God. That's
insane. It is.
Sorry,
it is insane.
Have to, register that.
There is a lack of access. It's a major problem. There is a limited number of health professionals who are trying to serve 150 million people just with diabetes.
I know how stressful it is as a founder and building solutions, and especially within healthcare. Why are you doing this?
My own family being plagued with type 2 diabetes on both sides. Diabetes does not hurt until it does, which is usually at the point where you're experiencing complications like kidney failure or neuropathy or heart disease.
I want to start the conversation here. My family, a lot of us have diabetes, including my dad. And actually, my mom and dad were here last weekend for the holiday, and I was drinking water a lot. And my mom was like freaking out. She's like literally caught me out of the room, and she's like, let's look at your blood level. I'm just like, no, I'm fine. I've just been mowing the yard since 6 a.m. I'm just genuinely exhausted, because she thought maybe it's like early signs of diabetes. Yeah. So that's how aware my family is. And I want to ask you this question. When it comes to diabetes, what is something that we miss as communities? This could be any communities at that.
Yeah, I think the number one thing that communities miss, and I speak on this from a point of view of my own family, being plagued with type 2 diabetes on both sides, it's the fact that diabetes does not hurt until it does, which is usually at the point where you're experiencing complications like kidney failure or neuropathy or heart disease. So that is the number one thing, and it's easy to ignore because it doesn't cause any immediate pain. We all know if we break a finger or we are really sick with a very high fever, then we immediately go to the doctor and seek the medical attention that we need to feel better. And that's the biggest problem with something like type 2 diabetes, is it can go unnoticed for so long. And I don't want to say it in a positive light, but it is good that your family's aware of the symptoms of diabetes, like you drinking more water than normal, because it's those types of small signs that will allow more families to become aware and to catch it before it becomes something too serious.
Right. So, like, how many types of diabetes are there? Because you mentioned type 2, and mind you, my mom is so educated on this, because again, her dad has it, my dad has it. So she's always been the caregiver on both sides as well. And I feel like she told me all the time, but I genuinely forgot. So yeah, because to me, I'm like, I'm young, I'm fine. I'm not really worried about it.
Yeah, and there's two main types now. There is information out there that there may be a third type, and people are linking that to diseases like dementia, but type 1 and type 2 are the two main types of diabetes that have been around for a long time, as long as we've pretty much been aware of diabetes. Mm-hmm. Type 1 is the type of diabetes that is an autoimmune disorder that a lot of times people develop as they call it juvenile diabetes, because you get it in your childhood. And my co-founder, he has type 1 diabetes. He's had it for over 30 years. And because he has type 1 diabetes, he's insulin dependent. And it's, for a lot of people, a lot more serious than type 2, at least initially. And so what you'll find is people with type 1, they are a lot of times really on top of their health. They are watching their blood sugar. They've got the latest technologies, from glucose monitors to insulin pumps, and they're aligning their health to make sure that they honestly stay alive. Whereas type 2 diabetes is more of a metabolic health condition where it's often tied to things like obesity or over-consuming sugars and carbohydrates and having elevated blood sugar for a long period of time. There's lots of different ways that healthcare professionals explain type 2 diabetes. One of my favorites is when your cells are are blocked, they're too full, and unfortunately most of the time that means too full of fat, then the sugar cannot get into your cells and be turned into energy. It's blocked, and so it stays in the bloodstream, and that's where you get the elevated blood sugars when you do the test. And so that's the very oversimplified explanation of type 1 and type 2. The easy way to think about it is most of the time, not always, people develop type 1 diabetes in their childhood or when they're younger, even into their teens, whereas type 2 is the one that we've seen rising rapidly over the last few decades. And a lot of that could be tied to our culture as Americans.
Right. And like, as you talk, like something that I picked up and back to my mom, is like there's a lot of advocacy, meaning the patient has to advocate for themselves a lot when it comes to diabetes. Is there some correlation to that being, there's a lack of just doctors available for it? That's why patients have to go above and beyond to make sure that they can take care of themselves.
Yeah. And that's a very good point. So in the United States today, between people with type 2 diabetes specifically and what's known as prediabetes, which we are now paying a lot more attention to things like prediabetes so that we can prevent type 2 diabetes. There's around 150 million people with both of those conditions today, and there are only 19,000.
Like in the U.S. alone?
In the U.S. alone, yep.
Oh my God. That's insane.
It is.
Sorry,
it is
I just
insane.
have to register that.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. Okay. And what's even more scary and concerning is now children are being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which never happened before. We're seeing children be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes when, as I mentioned earlier, type 1 diabetes was the one that happened when you were a child. And unfortunately, I could rant about this all day. A lot of it can be tied to our culture and how we eat and how we move or don't move, and the downside of the comfort that we have in the modern world. And so there's a massive amount of people with type 2 diabetes and an even larger amount of people who will develop it in the next 10 years. And there's a very limited number of specialists. So endocrinologists are like the top qualified doctor who will see somebody with type 1 or type 2 and provide a care plan, but they have a team surrounding them, and that usually consists of a diabetes specialist, a CDCES. I won't try to educate you on what that acronym stands for, but CDCES for short. And there's about 19,000 of them. And so and I love CDCESs, they're some of the best people. Even with 19,000, there's just no way for them to reach all of the people with diabetes and provide care. And so what happens most of the time is somebody with diabetes will see a specialist maybe once a year. And in between those visits, they are on their own. They are advocating for themselves. They're doing their own research. They're having to figure out how they are going to become healthy on their own by themselves. And in low access, underserved communities, the problem's even worse. So if you're fortunate enough to live near a city where there's resources and there's specialists, then, and even in that situation, you're limited in the amount of access you have to one of these specialists. Now imagine you live in a rural community that's low income, and you're facing all the different social determinants of health, like low financial status, lack of transportation, all of these different issues that you could be facing. Now your access is even less. And so that's the big problem we see is the rising number of people with this condition, the limited number of specialists, and that gap of access.
Wow. Incredible. Whoa. I mean, incredible, like in a scary way.
Yeah.
As we were talking, I had a guest here a few weeks ago, and he specialized in just like health records. And to his point was that a lot of people in our communities don't have access to doctors due to not having health history. It's really hard for them to go to a hospital and get immediate care because there's no history. And I want to know, like in the diabetes space, I actually read something, I can't remember where I read it, but it says that in the US alone, almost 15 million people in like underserved communities don't have access to like care. And I want to get your like thoughts on that. Like, how often do you see that as you were building this? Because I want to know who exactly is like impacted.
Yeah, it's such a big problem. And this is something the healthcare industry is been fighting and trying to innovate around for as long as I've been participating, which is now 10 years since I've graduated college. It is this disconnect where the companies who have built these amazing technologies to hold the patient records, the downside of them being the types of companies that they are is that they've built barriers to access that information, right? And we could go on a long discussion about that, whether it's good, whether it's bad, but it's just their business model. It's how they make money. And so the walls are closed. And because of that, there is this gap in understanding from patient and provider where the person, and we say patients all the time, but the person feels like they don't know anything about their health truly, and they have to rely on this provider. And then on the other side of that, the provider is seeing patient after patient after patient. They get 5-10 minutes with them. They don't have the time or the bandwidth to dive into that person's history, and they may not even have access. So it's this system that is almost eating itself and causing more issues because of that fact. And what I would love to see, and I think there's some amazing people working on this, is just empowering that person, the patient, to have full control over their records, their health history, so that they come into these conversations as advocates for themselves. They have the confidence to talk about what's important to them. Their questions are far more educated rather than guesses and worries. And today that really doesn't exist. It exists in some situations that are outside of the traditional healthcare system, but that is a major problem. And we've experienced this firsthand working with a lot of low-income, underserved communities where their baseline education and understanding of what diabetes even is was unbelievable, would catch us off guard to think you've had this condition for 10 years and your understanding of it doesn't even really make sense. It's not to the level of basic education around diabetes and how to manage it well. And when you don't have that baseline information, then your chances of you managing it well are almost zero.
Right. And like to your point, one thing that I noticed, especially in my own family, my grandma used to fight for her, like advocate for him to make sure that he like stays away from eating all these things, even though, her knowledge is very low. My mom, she used to work in healthcare. So she actually took it upon herself to make sure that my dad gets it. I get it, which she's constantly telling me. Because for some reason I gained weight. The last time she like saw me, she's like, "You've gained weight. Your cheeks are bigger." I was like, "No, I have not, Mom." So she's like genuinely concerned that I may have it. I'm like, your worry is adding more stress to me. And now I'm like overthinking. I'll feel a little pain. I'm just like, "Oh, is this diabetes? Yeah. I need to go." So I want to know, like, when it comes to family dynamic, how exactly does mental health look like when it comes to just the stress that a caregiver within the family has and the individual that actually has the diabetes? How does that play out?
That is a great question. There's this thing actually known as the diabetes police, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It actually has a negative effect on the person who you're speaking to. And I used to be the diabetes police for my dad, and that came from care and love, because my grandmother on my dad's side spent her last year of life living with us, pretty much in a room that we turned into a hospital room, suffering from health complications tied to diabetes. And so the only thing on my mind was, how do I prevent that from happening to my dad? Which then turned into, don't eat that, don't do this, you need to do this, you need to focus on this, which actually had a negative impact on him. So anytime I had a suggestion, immediately he had barriers and blockers up because I was the diabetes police. And that's one of the number one dynamics that I've seen, where somebody can be coming from a place of love and care, and it can have a negative impact on the person who actually is trying to manage better. And another issue that compounds on top of that is being from a family with Black men, right? Like we're taught to not need help and and to not reach out for additional support. And so a lot of this stuff we just carry internally until it becomes too much and something tragic happens. And so it was both of these things happening at once. However, as soon as myself, and I'm sure the rest of my family as well, laid off my dad a bit, he started to take it upon himself to manage his health better, to get in better physical shape, to exercise more, eat better, be motivated, and see how he could inspire other people, because he's witnessed the same thing with his own family members. And so he turned it to an inspiration when we finally gave him the space to do so, rather than just always trying to police him and make sure he was doing the right thing.
Right. No, yeah. I thank you for that. I'm going to cut this clip and send it to my mom and be like, titled Diabetes Police. Calm down, Mom. I appreciate it, but chill. I'm not going to say chill because God knows what would happen. But yeah, so I do want to like put language around how the symptoms actually look like, just in case someone watching this, because for me, in my case, my mom tells me all the symptoms, but I know that that's not her, her like expertise. She's coming from generations of people dealing with it, usually men in my family. And I want to kind of put language just so that someone watching, they can identify those symptoms.
Yeah. So, and the much better resource than me is going to be the American Diabetes Association website. They've got everything there in detail for somebody if you are interested. But some common symptoms, you mentioned it right from the beginning, is drinking water and still feeling thirsty. So you might have 5 glasses of water and still feel like you need another glass. That is a symptom. Frequent urination is also a symptom. And again, the ADA's website is a far better resource than myself. But fatigue is another symptom that you might experience. If you've noticed weight gain, and it's been a significant weight gain in a short amount of time, that's also a symptom. And the number one thing is, if you come from a family history of people who have type 2 diabetes, then it's always a good idea to get checked. So your age and your ethnicity play a big role. If you're 40 or older, 50 or older, 60 or older, anywhere in that age range, it's just good to be aware where you stand. If you come from a background like myself, I'm both African American and Hispanic on both sides. I check the box on higher risk. If you have a family member who has it, definitely just be aware of what could be happening. But for sure, if you're drinking a bunch of water and you're still feeling thirsty, if you're urinating frequently, if you have a lot of fatigue that you aren't really sure where it came from, these are also symptoms that should make you aware and at least spark your curiosity to see what's going on.
Wow. I mean, as you say this, I'm like mentally checking all that. I'm just like, oh gosh. It's like time to go check real quick here and call my mom. Like, hey, do you still have the blood thingy that I can use? Yeah, she like always has it in her purse. It's like the weirdest thing. She's just like, I'm just like, why do you always carry that? But yeah, so I do want to know, like, why are you doing this? Because you kind of referenced the why earlier, and I want to get into that. Like, what made you want to go all in and like start a company around it? Because I know how stressful it is as a founder and building solutions, especially within healthcare. Why are you doing this?
Yeah. So my family history is one, and that is when I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur and go for something that was going to be challenging and require me to become a better person, I picked healthcare because I could feel good about it and build a business around it that would make an impact on people positively. So there's really 2 main reasons. And one of those reasons is because I do feel an obligation to my family and my community based on the gifts I've been given and the opportunities I've been given to go for something larger that could impact everybody around me. So that is one major driver for me, is just that obligation to give back, just being fortunate with everything that I have. And then the other piece of the puzzle is healthcare, in my mind, is a broken system. And I know everybody says that on every podcast that is out there on healthcare, but it's true. And if I can play a small part in improving that system for the next generations to come, then that is something that gets me excited and inspires me, because one day I'm going to need the healthcare system. And I hope there's other people out there like ourselves who are changing the game so that when it's my turn to go through that system, the experience is transformed and helps me come out on the other side healed and feeling like I was truly cared for. And so those are two major factors. So once I decided I was going to be an entrepreneur, I was going to go for something that challenged me and required me to show up as my best self for decades, if necessary, then I picked healthcare because of, I believe there was a lot of change on the horizon, and now we're seeing a lot of that. This was 10 years ago. Digital health was really just getting going, and the momentum was starting to build. And now digital health companies are IPOing and building solutions that are making impacts at scale. So we're starting to see, it's still early, but we're seeing some of that impact. And then it was easy for me to tie it back to, okay, well, if I'm going to be an entrepreneur and I'm going to work on healthcare, what part of healthcare am I going to work on? Of course, type 2 diabetes, because that's what's impacted my family for so long. So it was a combination of that led me on this path, which, as you mentioned, has been, quite stressful and challenging, but has required me to transform as a human and develop myself to step up to the occasion and meet these challenges.
Right. Well, bless your heart, because I know, one of the reasons why I also started this podcast is because I'm also in the entrepreneurship space. I'm in the healthcare / mental health. And I come across all these phenomenal entrepreneurs, and I can tell we are all so exhausted trying to make something happen. And then I see all these podcasts. I was like, no one is doing justice as to telling their stories. So thank you for coming on and like telling your story the way you do. But one last thing that I want to talk about is the company itself. Like, Moment. I love the name. And I want to know why you even picked the name, number one, and then also what exactly is Moment?
Yeah, so we are a health technology company, and the name Moment comes from the moments of impact in a person's day that can make all the difference, right? And that's where we want to show up and make that impact, because we all know there's parts of the day where you can meet a healthcare professional, for example, or a fitness professional. We work with both, and we believe both make an impact on the spectrum of metabolic health, whether that's diabetes, obesity, or just general health and wellness. And it's the micro moments between those touch points where you have that human support, where a lot of the outcomes are decided. And so that's where the core name Moment comes from. Our flagship product, Milton AI, which is how most people know us today, through Milton. And with Milton, we built a platform for these healthcare providers and fitness professionals to scale their reach and support more people. So as we talked about earlier in the podcast, there is a lack of access. It's a major problem. There is a limited number of health professionals who are trying to serve 150 million people just with diabetes. That's not counting obesity or other negative side effects from not being physically healthy. And we want to give them the technology to be able to reach more people and make a bigger impact. And that's what Milton is all about.
Wow, that's incredible. Because, to my point with my family, my mom is becoming the advocate for all of us. And there's a lot of boys in my family. And she's concerned for all of us. But what you're saying, that you guys kind of figured out how to go about tackling the problem of like specialists being overwhelmed. Now there's a not like a mediator, but a mediator that's there, which is AI, to make sure that they can communicate with the patients through your platform. So how exactly can they find you? Like, let's say a specialist is watching this, or someone who owns a gym and they have a lot of like trainers within the gym. How do they go about partnering with you on number one, and then what would you like for them to know?
Yeah. So the first thing is head over to www.getmilton.com. That's where we're going to be. That's the main way to get a hold of us. You can easily book a call there. You can follow us on social media. Just look for the Milton Turtle. You'll see that profile picture everywhere that you search. And everybody always asks me about the turtle. It's inspired by the tortoise and the hare. So slow and steady wins the race. That's where the turtle comes from. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the number one thing just to know with what we're doing is we understand that AI can be scary. It can be intimidating. A lot of health professionals are wondering, is this going to take my job? We don't believe in that at all. We are advocates for AI supporting the human professional. It is human in the loop. That is what's going to be the most impactful solution into the future. And so as a health professional, if you work with Milton, that is the number one thing that's on our mind, is making an AI technology that extends you, because you are the most important piece of the puzzle. It is your relationship with your clientele or your patients that is going to drive the outcomes. And we just want to make that smoother for you, easier for you, and even more impactful for you, leveraging these technologies that are changing the world, but they are not here to replace you. That is our core message.
I love that, because that was going to be my next message, because I know I have a lot of therapists on this podcast as well. And one of their biggest fears is AI. It's like, because there's a lot of founders that are raising millions of dollars just to replace therapists, and they're not shy away from saying that. But you were saying, no, we want to amplify you as the specialist so that you can reach as many people as you can. I like that. So as we close out, is there anything that you would like to share? Maybe you have a new launch coming up, a new feature that you will like launching as well?
Yeah, so we are about 45 days from launching Milton 2.0. We've had amazing support and some early success with our first version of Milton that came out about a year ago, actually. We've worked with over 100 clinicians, 1,500 clients and patients. They exchanged over 250,000 messages with our AI technology. It's been an incredible ride the last 12 months, and all of that has now gone into the next version of Milton, which we are very excited to bring to all of you as health professionals here in the next 2 months. So if you'd like to check that out, again, head over to our website, getmilton.com. You can join the wait list or just stay tuned for updates as we get closer to releasing that.
Thank you so much for jumping on the Forum Nexus podcast. And I'm very excited for people to check this out.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right.